In the Middle East, Saudi Arabia is currently hosting a Momentum Conference in Riyadh, and that's a new summit that focuses on development issues for the kingdom as well as the global community. Now, one of the high-profile attendee institutions is the Organization for Economic Development and Cooperation, or the OECD. Robin Ogilvie, the OECD's head of reforms and partnerships for development, is attending the Momentum Summit. Ogilvie spoke to Arise News on development donor funding for Africa, innovation and technology across the continent, and Nigeria. Let's listen.
Look, these aren't easy times for international development assistance. They're not easy times for the aid sector. Just earlier today, I spoke of our latest aid predictions on aid cuts. We saw a 9% cut in global volumes of official development assistance to developing countries last year. We're predicting further cuts this year. It's not looking great. It's almost unprecedented for the 33-member Development Assistance Committee of the OECD that I represent to have this scale of cuts. 11 of our member states are planning cuts or have already begun cutting their aid budgets. And it's driven by a range of factors. I mean, I think, first of all, we've seen rapid changes in the global geopolitical landscape. I think that countries are, for better or for worse, becoming inward-looking or focusing more on immediate domestic challenges, such as defense and security, in the face of these global changes. And it makes spending on international development cooperation much harder to justify when you're faced with squeezed budgets, when you're faced with stagnating growth, and when you're faced with a public that looks at aid budgets with ever-increasing scrutiny. I see Africa as a continent and the least developed countries as a group as being particularly at risk, and they may well be disproportionately hit by the cuts in official development assistance by the OECD members. This worries me. I find it deeply concerning that after essentially 2 decades of steady progress against the Millennium Development Goals and then the Sustainable Development Goals, that we're backsliding. Some of that was triggered, of course, by the COVID-19 pandemic, but there are real risks there. I'm also concerned by rising insecurity in parts of Africa. Several of our members are either scaling back their aid programs or closing them in the Sahel, either because they feel that they can no longer cooperate effectively with partners in that region, or because it's no longer safe for them to maintain a diplomatic presence or maintain staff in those countries. And so sadly, those countries most hit by insecurity, some of those countries most hit by extreme weather events, by drought, are those who risk being hardest hit also by cuts in official development assistance. The first is that digital technologies are already transforming economies such as Nigeria's. They're already having a positive impact on citizens. Take PalmPay, for example, mobile banking app in Nigeria. Take M-Pesa, similar instrument in Kenya. I mean, all of these technologies are new. They were designed to tackle new challenges specific to many of these African countries, and they weren't previously tested in Europe or in other OECD markets. And I think this is fantastic. I mean, I really think it shows the power of technology to help countries leapfrog in development. In other words, you're a developing or emerging economy, you don't need to adopt the same institutions, follow the same investment paths as other countries have done historically. So there I think there's huge potential, and I think it can be built on further. Of course, many of those investments have been funded by donors, at least in their early years. And I think there's now an opportunity to take a step back to look at how those investments are paid off, for donors to learn how they can better support those kinds of investments for transformative impact. I think on the other side, and an interest for me within my team, and it's a team of 45 or so researchers based in Paris, is looking at how we can use AI technologies, and in particular large language models, the ChatGPTs of the world, to answer questions on what development aid is achieving and what it isn't achieving, where it might be better targeted, what the results look like, potentially identifying risks, helping our member donor agencies strengthen product proposals, and so on. So I think there's huge potential there to use AI technologies not as a substitute for human thinking and for human policy making, but as a way of bringing fresh, just-in-time business intelligence to decision makers in aid agencies and indeed in partner countries. I think I broadly welcome the growing number of development cooperation providers. Development cooperation has become, in a sense, a market, and I think it's good. To some extent, its intended beneficiaries have a choice of partners. They're able to assert their ownership, and they're able to figure out for themselves, who to partner with on what and on what terms. But I think it's really important to avoid seeing the so-called emerging donors as being substitutes for or filling the gaps left by some of the OECD economies that I mentioned at the beginning. On the contrary, I mean, this is not always where their value added lies. If I take some of the Southeast Asian countries that we're working with, whether it's Indonesia, whether it's Thailand, they offer something often quite different, but potentially even more relevant to some African countries. And that's in the form of knowledge, it's in the form of know-how, it's in the form of institutional learning, it might be in the form of innovative financial instruments, sukuk or green bonds. So I think it's important that we don't look at the emerging donors as a single bag, nor that we think of them as being a substitute for the OECD DAC donors, but rather as working together as bringing pieces of a larger jigsaw together. And I think the trick collectively will be to figure out how we optimize these very, very scarce resources all round to have maximum development impact.